Welcome to this Ambassador Forum 2021. And this is the breakout session for Don Loper talking about critical race theory. Do we need it? And my name's Kathy Wallace, but you don't need to remember that. If I'm the host, and you'll notice that all your microphones are muted, and we just do that. It makes it easier for everyone. And then if you have a question, send it via the Zoom chat. Please to ask a question, and then I will feed those questions to the speaker when he's Don, when he's finished with his talk. So don't want to take too much time here before we get started, but let me say a quick word of prayer, and then we'll get Don on here, and so that you can hear us talk. Okay. Heavenly Father, we love you, and we love your word, which is truth. And we thank you for this conference and this breakout session. We just pray that you use it to grow our trust in you and our witness and conversation with others. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to, here's Don, and there you go. Go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Kathy. I'd like to thank everyone that's part of the session today, and reintroduce myself. You know that I'm Don J. Loper. I attend here at Southwest Hills and have been for the last 10 plus years. I'm, basically, I would say an Oregonian. Most of my life has been out here, but I originally grew up in the South in Florida. I was born in Jacksonville, lived in Daytona Beach, and the majority of my years there was in Live Oak. If you've heard of the Swanee River, then that's Live Oak. And the ironic thing about it, I moved out here in 1975 and finished school, went to work for IBM, married, and 8 weeks after we were married, we became Christians. And I oftentimes look at that and think, well, I grew up in the Bible Belt and ended up coming out to Oregon, and the Lord saving me in one of what was then known at the time, one of the least churched states in America, and it's just kind of the irony of it all. So I've been a Christian for 39 years and have seen a lot of things in my day, both on this side of it and the 29 years prior. I think I just gave you all my age there. But I'd like to talk about this matter of CRT and do we really need it? What really is the motivation behind it? It came about, actually I heard about CRT in 1989. There was an incident that occurred in Portland, and it kind of came up but then dissipated, and I never heard anything since. I mean, it's this deep thought process that they have for what racism is about. And I know that most of you probably have been in sessions. There was one a few weeks ago that I attended here at church. That was very, very good, and it taught me a lot and opened up really a lot of thought and information for me. But really, what is the motivation behind all of this? And earlier this year, my wife and I was to do a talk at one of the local school districts on CRT. And so we were invited, things were set up. My approach would have been more than just the storytelling portion of it. I wanted to ask these very questions. Do we really need it? And what's behind it all? Well, the long and short of it is that the meeting was scheduled, then it was terminated or canceled. And we found out that they indicated that they would not be teaching CRT in school, that it would be called something called cultural responsible training. And so it kind of dissipated. And soon after, as you know, by now and today, CRT is everywhere, and it is in public schools. So if you, in reading up on all of the information that I found on it, I concluded that what they're trying to solve is their aim is anyway to solve the justices or the gross injustices of that have occurred over time to people of color here in America through oppression and discrimination. And the thing that they're doing, it's all inclusive, in my opinion. It looks back to a time where, when I grew up and things were, there was discrimination and segregation. And so my question to them would have been that, where's that now? I really don't see that happening in our day. And so another thought I had was, how would they do that? How would they, how could it be done in any way in terms of giving restitution for all that has occurred? And so I found out that, in essence, in this particular school, they were already doing some things. There was a process, if you will, called white privilege, in which white students were to, I'm assuming, step aside in matters that related to minority students. And that got a lot of pushback. And so they changed that to equity. And I think equity is what they're running with, but CRT is the main focal point. I just heard last week that there was a situation at one of the schools where a young white kid was totally reprimanded for having, the mask mandate is in schools, and he had his mask below his nose, and he was totally reprimanded. And the same person saw people of color with their masks down below their nose and mouth and didn't say anything. And so it's kind of a form of what's to come, I think, and I think is really unnecessary. So, I mean, if we have to look at our current system bringing any kind of legislation or judgment towards any kind of policies regarding this, we're in trouble here, I think. So I looked at these different concepts of the tenets of CRT. And I'm not going to go over all of them, and this is some that stood out to me. The very first one, I think in the session that I attended earlier in the year here, said some of the same points about race being a social construct and not biogenetic, which right off the top, is anti-God. God said that he created us in his image, and in his image, he created male and female. So there's a direct attack on the image of God right off on the first one. And no matter how you look at it, CRT is anti-God, and it plays very well with the public school, who has already taken God out of it. I look at the fact that if you are a Christian, you shouldn't have a problem understanding that. If you have a problem with the first 9 words of the Bible, then that is it's going to be difficult for you. And as far as race, I looked and I read as much as I could. They never say racism. They're literally saying that the races are generated through these social constructs, even throughout the world. And what came to my mind was Genesis chapter 10, where, after the flood, obviously every nation and tribe was destroyed except for Noah and his sons. And this is part of the scriptures where you obviously know about the story about Ham and Japheth and Shem, but it lines up the nations that they fathered, and every tongue and nation it mentions comes through them. And so there again, it's still in the image of God. The other area that I looked at was, now I don't have the intellectual things and all of the information on this. I just spilled out what I thought that, my interest in them. But intersectionality and anti-essentialism, and just reading and trying to see what that was about. The example given is a African-American can be a woman or gay. In other words, it's like almost like there are two streams of potential discrimination that can come that way. But I really see it as another movement coming under the umbrella of the CRT. I guess anti-essentialism can be, I'm not sure, used in any particular way. I kind of think of being an African-American and a Christian, it's kind of, obviously they wouldn't go for that. But the other thing was storytelling, counter storytelling. This is a point that some of the people with the school district wanted Joyce and I to talk about per se, but and so those three ones that I looked at, I will say that, when you look at public education, corporate America, the military, state, local, state, and federal government all have embraced this, and medical services as well. CRT is really turning into a political firestorm. I mean, it's like, where does it go from here? And that coupled with BLM and the 1619 project and other things, it can become major and be chaos. Obviously the church is not mentioned in any of the lines of CRT because it's anti-God. But the bottom line is that their remedy thus far is counter discrimination. And God only knows where that might lead. That's their path of correction. Because they characterize racism as a perpetual sin that's engrafted, if you will, in the American society. And if you're white, you're guilty. And, it's even if you are a believer, you fall under that category, according to them. So I'd like to just give some credence to why I disagree with all of that and why I think it is not to the extent of what they are claiming. I'm not saying that racism didn't exist, and perhaps it, that it does. I think it is an individual human condition, and it's not just singled out to America. And what has happened here, I think great strides have been made to correct some things. Either that, and and I don't think I'm blind to the facts. Based on my isolated situation, if you will, I know all about the inner city. You don't hear about them that much, but I have family in Miami and Opelika and Liberty City are, really inner city. And I know I can attest to how they think but I'd like to share some things about how life was for me growing up in the South in the 50s and 60s. Now, I will say that, you know, I've already told you my age, so I can tell you the year that I was born was 1953. So that time from up until 61 or so, I didn't have a care in the world as to what was going on. I was a kid and things didn't really matter. I'm sure there was some effect from it, but it was not until I was like third grade or so that I really start seeing and understanding what was happening, how things really were. You know, segregation was a law and it was enforced. You know, I have had a difficult time prepping for this because it made me think about things that I had long forgotten, kind of put behind me. When I think about my growing up days, normally it's who I was with, you know, my family and what have you. And so, you know, the conditions were, I mean, imagine trying to go to Starbucks and it's privately owned and there's a sign that says no colors. Or you go to the grocery store to shop and there's this particular line for Black people to check out of. And that's the only line you could use. Medical services, dental, things like that were difficult to come by. So the older I got, the more I was exposed to what was going on. Down in the small community, isolated, and I'm not trying to paint a picture of pity for my time coming up. I believe that there were areas worse than where we were. And the certain side of the downtown area, you couldn't walk on that side of the street. There was a public park, only one huge public park, had about an 8-foot fence around it. It was gated. No Black kids could go there, period, during this time. You know, so one thing I would say is that that I learned early on was that all white people didn't agree with that. And I saw it clearly the older that I got, but they tolerated it. And, you know, it was just kind of the way that it was. I remember that, you know, those things being vividly in my mind. There was never any physical harm or anything like that. I mean, we didn't have, we had one, the church that we went to was named African Baptist. And there was never any harm. Other places had, you know, different things going on. During that time, the whole time that I'm in Live Oak, I'm 283 miles from where Martin Luther King Jr.'s headquarters was. And, you know, he took care of issues in other places and things like that. But I just remember those prohibited areas and things that you weren't allowed to do. If you think about segregation with segregation, you didn't go to church together. There was a theater, you were segregated. We went around to the back of the theater, went upstairs, and we were upstairs looking at movies, and it was the only way out. It was a fire hazard. You know, there were things like that went on. My parents only bought gas at one station, and it was a gentleman who my dad had grew up with. You know, my father was born in 1921, and it was hard to get him to talk about how things were for him. But what he did say is that we had it better, you know, and so there was progression from the 20s, 30s, and 40s to where we were now, and America was moving forward. This is not, I have no intention of saying that things didn't happen or there weren't issues. I think one of the biggest how should I say, points that got me the most was the matter of education. There was 2 Black schools in Live Oak. My father moved up from Daytona Beach initially to be the principal of one of them, which initially closed. And by then we had moved up and we were going to a school called Douglas High. Now the school was 1 through 12. It was like a campus with elementary school, middle school, and junior and high school. And my father became the principal of that school. And, you know, education was stressed, excuse me, as to a way to have a better life, frankly. In the 7th grade, it was discovered, I think teachers, and as I understand it, my father did know as well. We had been for years, one text behind of the white school. There was only 2 schools at this time. In other words, if there was an edition that came out in English, science, or math, you know, it went there first, and then when the next edition came out, we got that particular edition. And so when you think about prep for school and potential college, if you wanted to go to college, that to me was more devastating, because by that time in my life, you know, for all intents and purposes, I had decided that I wanted to be a dentist. And so there was a University of Florida, which was 75 miles away. Well, the long and short of it is that once it was discovered by parents, teachers kind of got together and beefed up the curriculum and caught us up and things like that. But I will say that my first 10 years in school at an all-Black school, because of segregation, were the best years of education that I had. And we learned about American history, and it includes slavery. It included, rather, slavery. They did not shy away from that particular part of American history, but we were taught that we could, because of conditions now, we could improve the future in our lives. And that has gone away from schools today. I'm not sure how they would do that. So as things progressed, you know, year after year, things were the same. Segregation was pressed down on you, and you know, almost in every walk of life, no matter what you did. Travel was difficult rather, because of it. So we moved through 65, 66, 67 the same way. And then in 68, you all know what happened. Martin Luther King was killed, and you know, and later Bobby Kennedy in June. And we didn't know that it was going to happen, but the very next year, schools integrated. The 68, 69 school year was integration. But our little community in town did it a different way. What they did is they bought the same number of white teachers over to the all-Black school, and the same number of Black teachers to the all-white school. And that's how the 68, 69 school year was taught. My father was no longer a principal, but he was a math teacher at the high school, at the white high school. And so the next year, the student bodies integrated, and our school became a middle school. And, you know, considering my life and all the things that were going on around us, and everywhere was not like that, I look back on it and I think about divine intervention in some points, that there was never an incident at our school during integration. And I'm not sure if it's the way that they allowed it to progress, but it was very, very peaceful. And probably the only thing that we had was, and coaches would let that go on, is football players on the field getting a little rough with each other because of that. But it was pretty straightforward. And so segregation was removed. There was still some things that lingered, places lingered, people were still posing difficulty and not wanting things to change. And this is where I will always say that racism is a human condition, and it's individuals that cause it. CRT says differently, that it's systemic in America. And but I can attest to the fact that white people were integral in the development of my life from that point on. Looking back to some of the things that Martin Luther King talked about, you all know about his "I Have a Dream" and message and different things like that about all God's children coming together. One of the things that I'm certain of it, he never sought restitution and equity. He asked for equality and opportunity. And I remember my father telling us that, excuse me, that we have it now, there's no excuse. And so all the books were the same edition at this time. And it was up to us as, to the opportunity was given, now the responsibility was ours to move forward. And we didn't have dropouts in school like we do now. And I think one of the underlying factors to that is that in the neighborhood where I lived, there were 2 Black neighborhoods, and there were no trailer parks, there were no apartments. They were all families with homes, moms and dads. There were 3 or 4 that had lost parents, and so they were in single family situations. But my parents didn't really teach me to hate in spite of all that was going on. I was not brought up that way. But that was a key point that I realized that doesn't happen today. So, looking back on it all, those were some key points that I recall in terms of what allowed me to be prepared for what was ahead. Now, in my life, obviously, I moved on, and some years in college, military, and the military was different than the military is today. They had to deal with, when I was in there, some racial situations, but it was not anything overboard. And oftentimes it was never a huge amount of people in terms of what went on. But I served, and shortly after that, I moved out to Oregon. And just a little bit about my more recent life, coming to Oregon, finishing school, and marrying, and getting a great job marrying, and being led to the Lord. Prior to that time, though, when I moved out here, I was working for IBM, and I had one situation that occurred in downtown Portland. So my territory was Southwest Taylor to 405 front up to 5th. And I had in that territory the Interstate Bank Tower. And on the top floor was Willamette Industries. And there was a particular piece of IBM equipment that I worked on, and because of the electronics in it. And it was involved with the CEO's office. And so anyway, I make the call, and I'm held up because there's never been a Black person make a call there as I understood. So it was that kind of thing. It turned out to be great. I mean, I ended up being at the CEO's house for dinner, who lived up on in West Hills behind Portland. But that was an incident where, you know, it kind of made me think about past events and different things in life. 1980, I moved to Tigard, and I've been in Tigard since. And my territory changed for IBM, and it became a little bit broader. And so I moved out here because it was more economical and convenient. And I remember trying to find Black people in Tigard. And I knew where Black people lived in Portland, in Northeast Portland. And I didn't. I say that because, you know, I never had any incidents or any kind of you know, I shopped at Tigard for Fred Meyer's. There used to be a Safeway on Hall and Pacific Highway. People were kind to me. And I don't know if it was just me or what the Lord was about to do in my life. And, but, you know, my life went without any kind of a hitch. And I dealt with corporate America for the most part here in Oregon. And then I became a believer, and my church was Westgate Baptist at the time, where I was there for over 2 decades. And my wife and I were the only Black people there. And I remember talking to people about, you know, people that I'd hung out with, you know, before becoming a Christian. And, you know, I get feedback like Christianity is only for white people. Now this is coming from Black people. And the church was the, you know, you got to look at the church, man. It's the last institution to integrate. And so you know, then I had learned a few things about God and his word. And my comeback was that the church is not your typical institution, it's the Lord's. And it's not, you know, that God has, the Lord said he'd build his church and the gates of hell would not prevail against it. So you can't look at the church in light of integration per a corporation or the military or the US government. And I also indicated that the church was worldwide, and there are all races of people in the church throughout the world. So God does know about integration. Anyway, those kind of things like that happen. And during that time at Westgate, my tenure with IBM ended. And I took a position with a company that didn't last. And with all our kids had been born quite young at the time. And I'm faced with this company actually folded. And I was faced with really what to do. So a lot of prayer went into that. It's November 1990 at this time. And I ended up becoming self-employed. The long and short of it is. And I had a particular set of skills that I've been able to add things on to over the years, and I've been self-employed since. I mention that because, again, I was always living in Tigard. I've always had white clients. And I don't mean just mom and pop shops, but corporations in the area. And even now in California, Washington, Oregon, Idaho. And so you know, God has truly blessed me in that regard. And so we hear all this about racism here and racism there. And, you know, I've never had an issue with financial matters in terms of getting what I need. I don't care for debt, but getting a mortgage was not a, you know, if you read closely to what CRT is saying, it's all those areas of society discriminates, and there are issues for Black people. And I must be an exception to the rule, but when I think about my family and talking to them, the same exists for them. So, but I wanted to mention that matter of being self-employed and not having any but white clients and different things like that. It's not to deviate from the fact that racism is really a people matter. It's a human condition. The Bible talks about the heart being desperately wicked. Who can know it? And there are things that go on in people. I'll admit to you, over the years, I come across situations that things happen, and my thought has been, are they doing that because I'm Black? I don't play the race card though. God has taught me how to appeal to people, how to go up and try and find out what's going on, and not see every condition as something racial. And so it's truly helped a lot. And my children were born in the mid to late 80s, and they've come up in a world where they're surprised at hearing what we're hearing about today, and they're trying to formulate in themselves, where's this at? Because both my daughters are in the medical field. My son's an electrician, and Janae's with the Providence system, and she's had a few issues here and there but they're more people issues than a systemic condition. And so I just would like to encourage Christians, particularly believers, to not buy into that bill of goods. You have to search in your own heart where you are with regards to how you relate to people of color. Me, I'm here. You can bounce anything off of me anytime, and would love to talk to you even more. But I have at kind of the end of my talk, what is the real problem? Because I mentioned before, what's the motivation behind all of this, or do we really need it? And if you look closely at CRT, they tack on this systemic condition of racism in every area of society. And what you have to realize is that the same areas that they list are all anti-God. And so what is happening is they've taken God out of everything. And so now they're trying to fill the void with something that's even worse. What needs to happen is these policies need to be removed. I'm not sure how it happens, but I think if you think about it, our military, our government, corporate America, media outlets, the mainstream media, education, they have nothing to do with God. All of them have just removed everything out, and CRT just fits right in to all of what is going on. It's sad, but it kind of says where we're headed there. I think any kind of solution that I could offer is prayer, prayer, prayer. Is what is needed. Another condition is, when I think about my people, Black people, the family unit, I mentioned to you how families were in my day. I think they were even better in my father's day, and moving up to the 50s. For Black and white people, it starts in the home. There was an incident that I heard of recently where a mother was at a board meeting and was dubbed a terrorist, a domestic terrorist, because she doesn't want her child to be taught CRT. And I'm not sure what all that means, but I think it's going to come to that, where we have to get back to indoctrinating our children and grandchildren with the Word of God and countering these things that are going on publicly. Um, And I just trust that the brothers and sisters that I fellowship with and know have a heart condition of Christ, that, and be like the Apostle Peter. He has some issues with, discrimination. And you all know the story where he did not want to go and speak to Cornelius. And God sends down the sheet, if you will, of different, what he called common and unclean animals, and told him to kill and eat. And he goes, and in Acts 10:34, he says, when he sees Cornelius and his house converted, he says, of a truth I perceive that God is no respecter of persons. And, that's the kind of heart we need to have in these days. And it needs to be more of a focus than ever before. So I trust that this talk helps. That's all I really have right now. I'll, I guess, take any questions that anyone might have, and hopefully I haven't used up all the time. I have no idea what time it is. So
It's
anyway,
done. That was great. It's 10:42. We have about,
10?
not 10, 12. Oh my
Okay.
gosh, whatever. Yeah, so we have about 13 minutes for
Okay.
questions. I do have one from Herb Gray, and it said, can Don describe how his parents influenced his understanding of race while you were growing up under Jim Crow? So,
Well, I can tell you the incident. And, I kind of said it to a degree earlier. In 1966, my father and I were walking to the movie, and we were going to see a Western, and some guys, they had a pickup, and, their Confederate flag and different things like that. They came and they reeked us up one side and down the other with every derogatory term that you could think of. And, the stuff I had never heard before. I was 13 at the time, but I had not had anything like that happen. And I remember my dad saying that, basically all white people are not like that. And I learned to see that as I grew up through, even in my teen years, through things that happened. My parents, so that kind of thing occurred. My father, being a principal, worked very closely with white people, frankly, and the school board and various things like that. My mother was a social worker, and it's probably called something different today when she was not a homemaker. So they were, basically professional people, and we just weren't taught to hate. Another thing about my past is I don't know if we're one of my sisters is correlating our history. We're back to 1847. Obviously, slavery is somewhere in there. But on my mother's side, my great-grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee. And on that side, we found a connection to the Trail of Tears. So it's kind of another angle of some of the how should I say, racial matters of the United States. So, I don't know if that answers it, but I wasn't, cursing and things like that and derogatory things about people. There just wasn't a lot of it. in our house.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question from Don Keel. It's a little long here. So he first asked, are there any great studies or discussions available as to what the Black community actually thinks of CRT? Okay. I am concerned, he says he's concerned that we're not getting the real story from the mainstream media. And it goes on, it is hard for me to see what positive, constructive proposals have come from CRT. It seems that they just want to condemn everyone and tear down the system. It's
I
not
agree.
clear to me to see how that supports communities of color. Does the Black community see this differently? If so, what is their view? So
I would have to say I really don't know. My family is my circle of contact. Joyce's family is here. We have a very difficult time talking to them about the Lord, let alone something like CRT. My personal thought, though, is I think that too many Black people champion this particular movement, and I think in the long run, it will come against them. Some people ask me something along the same line: why do we always vote Democrat? But I know CRT is a totally different thing. But no, I don't know of any efforts to, put forth information that that shows the ins and outs and what this is really about. Maybe I should start an article and write something and get it out there. I don't know, but yeah, my feeling though is that they are embracing it.
yeah,
Unfortunately.
yeah, get what you mean. Okay, so another question from Bill Jones. He says, from your experience and observation, what are the similarities and differences between CRT and the civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s versus today with CRT?
Well, as the previous gentleman says, CRT is condemning, have that condemning type approach. The civil rights movement, I think, was, aside from all the incidences that occurred, I think the message was to do things peacefully, and the request was for equality and opportunity, not this guise of a kind of a restitution effect for all this that has occurred, or this counter discrimination process that you see going on. I mean, counter, reverse, or whatever, nothing like that occurred. And I'm saddened by the fact that it's always about racism. It's like it's sold as a bill of goods, and any kind of movement that they want to push on us, race is out front, and people cringe at it like we're some dire racist nation, and that's just not the case. So I would say that it's very different in terms of what we got out of the civil rights movement and what it presented. Even though there was violence back then in those days, it was a lot more different.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Okay.
And I was given a 5-minute warning, so And that 5 minutes is up. So
Yeah.
I thank everybody for joining, and thank you, Don. That was extremely interesting.
Mhm.
Your perspective on this. Definitely not one I've heard,
Right.
ex- except for I'll have to admit, I do have a friend who grew up, she's Japanese,
Mhm.
and a lot of similar things
Right.
that you said was kind of what she has told me.
Mhm.
So yeah, anyway, enjoyed this talk immensely. Okay,
Right.
thanks
Thank you.
everybody. I'm gonna close the breakout session.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, Don.
You're welcome.
Okay.